Americans eat a lot of meat. We eat it for all meals of the day, because it's the 4th of July, because we're at a baseball game, and because, hey, it's on sale. We consume more of it than the rest of the world. And all that consumption has a big impact. If everyone ate meat like Americans, it would be a disaster. So what is it about us that's turned America into a nation of carnivores? It could be our wealth, but there are other countries that are wealthier. It could be our farm subsidies, but lots of other countries have those too. I was curious, so I phoned a meat historian.
My name is Maureen Ogle, and I'm a historian.
For 7 years, she researched meat, and in the end, she wrote a book about it. This book. So, why are we such meat fanatics?
One thing that's important to know about the people who settled North America is that they all left a place that food was often scarce in a way that's nearly impossible for us to imagine now.
In Europe, land was in short supply and cities were growing rapidly. Only royalty ate meat regularly because they were the only ones who had access to grazing land. In America, by contrast, the land was there for the taking, from the Native Americans. Colonists didn't know how far west the West went, and with their legal structure, almost anyone could own livestock.
It was so easy for livestock to reproduce. Within just a generation or two, colonists became accustomed to the notion that meat was always available and always on the table.
There were cases where indentured servants complained or ran away because they weren't getting fed enough meat, and in general, the colonial legal system agreed. Everyone deserved meat.
I think that sense of entitlement became a defining characteristic of what it meant to be an American.
Right from the beginning, we wanted meat because it felt like America was teeming in this endless bounty of wildlife, land, and pigs. After Americans settled in and got comfortable, farmers packed up and headed to the city. But urban Americans kept their appetite for meat.
That's important because city people don't produce their own food. Approximately 1810, only about 7% of Americans lived in an urban place. By the time the Civil War broke out, almost a quarter of them did.
Initially, people just ate less meat. It made sense. Fewer farms meant less. But urban Americans demanded more and cheaper meat, and our modern industrial system obliged. By the late 1800s, America had built up an extraordinarily large, lucrative, and efficient system for raising livestock, turning them into meat, and distributing that meat to stores across the U.S. Meat traveled distances in hours, distances that once took weeks. Transportation and other technologies like refrigeration made meat cheaper and cities more attractive. And cheap meat is what Americans wanted. So what's the deal with Americans and meat? It's the idea that we're entitled to it, the sense that land and resources are plentiful and inexhaustible. And even if the U.S.'s consumption has decreased ever so slightly, we're still far more carnivorous than most. Most countries love meat, but we Americans have had such a full history with it because it was, from the very beginning, cheap and available. And we've worked hard to keep it that way.
Meat is a whole lot like gasoline. The only time Americans really get upset about meat is if suddenly it seems unaffordable. And as soon as the meat prices go back down, well, then no one's got any complaint.
When Americans met meat, it was love at first sight. Now we have to figure out how to live happily ever after.